Hi there. Today we're making the very last block in the Quilty Chicks Block of the Month. We're making the flower 4, the Sawtooth star. First thing we're going to do is we're going to gather the background pieces we already cut and then cut our yellow fabric for the petals, a little bit of green for the stem, and the brown for the centers. After we do that, we're going to prep this little stem piece. Now this stem piece is going to go between the main stem and the bottom of the flower, so you can see it all cute and it doesn't look like the stem isn't connected to the flower. So the first thing we're going to do that is to sew these little white pieces to either side of our green piece and then press towards the white piece. I don't think you need to see me do that at the sewing machine, so I'm going to do that real quick and be right back. Now that we've got our little white pieces sewn to either side of our little green stem pieces, it's time to press. And we're going to press towards the background fabric. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want this little piece to nest really well with this stem piece. So the seams are pressed in on the stem, and if we press the seams out on the stem extension, then they will nest together really nicely, and we can get those stems to match up instead of being just a little bit off. So this is, sometimes it doesn't matter which way you press, but this is one time that it does make a difference. All right, we've got these all prepped. Oops. Now we're going to draw a line from corner to corner on all of the yellow squares, and we're going to place a yellow square on top of these rectangles, and you can refer back to the diagrams for the orientation of the lines. We're going to sew a yellow piece onto the left side of each of the rectangles, including these little stem rectangles. So just place that there. If you feel comfortable with it, you don't need to pin, but it'd probably be a good idea to pin all of these in place, and then we'll go over to the sewing machine and just stitch on the line. Now we're going to sew on the line on both the plain rectangles and the stem rectangles. So we've done a ton of this. You should be absolute pros. You start on that flat side, not this tip side, and then just sew right on the line. And then without cutting thread, we can just add the next one on until we're done. Now that we've sewn on the line, on the little yellow squares, we're going to cut them apart and then trim the corner off about 1/4 inch from the line. Repeat that for all of the units. And when we look back at the directions, it says to press toward the yellow squares. And then we'll just repeat for the second side. Refer to the diagram. The line is going up to the left. Pin this in place and then go sew on the line again. This block, I mean, you've probably made a sawtooth star before if you've been quilting for a while, and this just comes together really easily. It's a great block to end with. Super easy, super cute. All right, I'm gonna go sew on the line. I don't think you need to see it. We'll just start here on this flat end and sew to the corner. So we've sewn on the line and now we just trim and press. We'll press towards the yellow again. Pressing towards the yellow will give the flower just a little subtle pop because the yellow's lifted a little bit above the background fabric. All right, let's put together our flower. Now I'm just demoing one flower. You will of course make two. So let's see here, we got our little sunflowers there, and our stem at the bottom, and then background squares here. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew background squares to either side of this petal flying goose and 2 squares to either side of this, and then 2 of these petal flying geese to each side of the center brown square. So just to keep everything organized, I'm going to pin everything while we're here. And I'm just going to pin both sides. And after I sew one side, I can take out the pin and just sew the other side. And then press them both when I get back. All right, I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew on each side with a 1/4 inch seam. All right, I've sewn on both sides and I'm going to cut them apart and press. Especially when we're doing a little bit of the final type of seams, I like to set the seam before I press open. And again, you'll refer to the pattern for pressing instructions. We're going to press towards the little white squares and towards the middle brown square. And because we're pressing like this, the block pieces will nest together really well. And since we're pressing away from the flying geese units that are pieced and towards unpieced square units, it helps minimize the bulk, and so we're not trying to fold a lot of fabric back on itself. All right, make sure all of our little sunflower petals are facing the right way, and now we're just going to sew these 2 smaller units to the center unit. Now I'm going to definitely pin here, and I'm going to move these pieces around and line them up, and I'll be able to feel that these seams are nested and right next to each other. And when I can feel that, I know that the points are going to match and it's going to look really nice. There we go. Now, if your seams are nested and matched up right here, but it looks like, for example, in mine, this brown piece is a little shorter than this flying geese unit because you were off a little bit with the piecing, you can just pull it just a little bit as you press it, and you see how now it's lined up evenly when I give it a little pull. And that amount of pull won't mess up the final block. And when you give it a good press, you won't even notice it. So I'm gonna go sew that. All right, I've sewn on both sides and it looks good. We've got these points matched up nicely. Okay, I totally cut off the point there, but you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because we're going to be looking at the cuteness of it, not necessarily all of the points. We do the best we can and then, you know, move on and just enjoy it. All right, we're going to be press towards the middle. And I like to give it a spray with a little bit of water or starch and give it a final press. I find this helps make everything lie really flat. If there's ever something that's a little out of whack or not straight, I can kind of give it a little tug and iron it straight, like this right over here. I'm not sure what happened, but if I give it a little bit of a tug and iron it, I can straighten it out. And this is why, boys and girls, we don't iron like this, especially when we've sprayed something, because the water can loosen those fibers and you can distort it out of shape. In this case, I wanted to distort it into a better shape, so you can use that to your advantage if needed. All right, now we'll just sew the flower top onto the stem. When you do this, you're going to want to pay attention to these seams. Make sure they're really nested together well and pinned so that they line right up so your stem doesn't do a little ziggity zag. If you want to be extra sure about this, you can increase your stitch length to a 3 or a 4 and baste over just this section before you do your final seam. Then you can, after basting, you can open it up, or even right now when it's pinned, you can open it up, check to make sure everything's lined up okay, and then go sew the seam with a smaller stitch length. I'm gonna go do that real quick and be right back. All right, this is the big reveal time. Setting the seam, and I'm going to press towards the stem. Yay! It's so cute. I love these. I love these flowers so much. And it's lined, my stem's lined up really nice. A teeny bit off, it's fine. Yay! So this is the last flower in the block of the month. You'll make 2 of these. And now it's time to put the whole quilt together. I'm gonna make a separate video walking you through how to sew the quilt together. It's pretty straightforward, but if you're a visual person, we'll go through it all. All right, thanks for sewing along with me this year, and have fun sewing this last block.